Welcome to the Daily Deuce. I'm Gary Graves from just outside Louisville, Kentucky, and in Maryland, my home state, the land of pleasant living. John Webster, how are you doing while you watch spring training baseball?
Hey man, I'm doing real good, Gary. Another great week in sports, and also another week as we get closer to the start of the Major League Baseball season, which is an exciting time for both of us. World Baseball Classic is also around the corner. They're having some warm-up games this week as well. But hey man, it's a beautiful time of the year. And with that being said, being a beautiful time of the year, we're into March and getting closer to something called March Madness, man. What's going on with this NCAA basketball? We're going to do the men first, and we're going to talk about the women, man. And also on that women's side, you had a very interesting picture you put on Facebook yesterday. We'll come back and talk about that with the women's side. But the men's side, man, Arizona's tough. Duke is tough. You take it from there.
Well, right now, I say the line forms behind the Duke Blue Devils, who just oh, I hate to use the term obliterated because that might be hyperbole, but just dominated NC State, and then they've got a game, a season finale coming up Saturday against rival North Carolina, and they'll have revenge on their minds after being beaten on a last second three-pointer in the previous meeting. It's Duke, we have raved all season about just how good Duke is with Carlos Boozer and I'm sorry, Cameron Boozer, son of Carlos Boozer. It's so easy to make that mistake because really he reminds me of his dad when he was in college, back in the early
Mm.
2000s. And sometimes when I think about Maryland's championship year, that I can't help but wonder if Duke hadn't been knocked out in that second weekend, would we even be talking about the Terps being national champions? Because they had lost that previous meeting, but that was a pretty daggone good Maryland team, and I think they probably would have figured it out, that third time around. But fast forward to this Duke team that it's hard for me to believe, and really don't want to say that they're better without um, the kid in the NBA there, Cooper Flag. Um, I can't believe I'm actually forgetting names like that since he's having a good rookie year in the league. But I remember where we thought that there might be a fall off after they they go deep and into the NCAA last year, and then he departs for the NBA, and just think, well, that was one of their best teams to get that far. But then here comes Cameron Boozer and his brother, who doesn't get the same kind of minutes or publicity. But that team is just, again, they've Duke has some dudes, and it's almost kind of scary how well they're playing right now. That said, there's also that belief that maybe they're playing too well too soon. With March Madness, you've got the ACC tournament, men's tournament coming up next week, and you feel like, okay, as good as they look, don't you want to save a little bit for March when it counts? But if you're Duke, I'd say if you got this train rolling down the tracks, with six diesels in front of you, that you don't want that train to stop at any point. So it's kind of like six in one hand, half dozen in the other, and it's a good problem for the Blue Devils to have.
Well, I think from what I've seen this year, Duke is the most complete team I've seen this year. Offensively, defensively. I watched them Saturday. They played Virginia, and they methodically took Virginia apart and
Yeah,
ended up beating them by about 20 or so. So,
and that's a good Virginia team too.
yeah, that Virginia team had only lost 3 games.
Hmm.
And it was a game where they were totally in control, meaning Duke. Isaiah Evans had a field day in the first half, hitting 3-point shots. Boozer really wasn't the one that, Boozer got to the foul line, and Boozer had a quiet like 16 and 10. But
Hmm.
they are good. They got an aircraft carrier in Ngumba, who's he's a rim protector and he runs that
I
floor and
love that
plays great.
term.
He plays great defense, man. I think they if it's possible, I think this team is better than last year's team. Yeah, that's my
Yeah,
thought.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Arizona, Arizona played Texas. No, Iowa State took them apart last night, and I think Arizona's very good. Dante said to me he thinks it's going to be Arizona and Duke at the end. I uh, I think Arizona's very good, but I don't think they'll make it to the championship. Don't be surprised if you see one more time Duke and Michigan. One more time, but you'll get the same result. Duke will win. Um, right now, the top four seeds are Duke, Michigan, UConn, and Arizona. Houston's the number two seed. Wherever Houston ends up playing, if they're a number two seed, nobody wants to see them because they are
Hmm.
a tough minded defensive team. So it's going to be really interesting, man. This weekend you got Duke and Carolina again. I think I think Duke gets Carolina this time. I don't think Duke lets that lead get away this time like they did the last time. And they're also
Hmm.
playing in Durham. That's going to be a difference, I think, for Duke winning the game. Um, this tournament is going to be very interesting, Gary. Um, you have some really good teams. Illinois is really good. Purdue is really good. As you said, Virginia is really good. Florida, defending champions, they are good as well.
Yeah,
Texas Tech seems, I don't know what they're doing, but they seem to be playing better without JT Toppin than they did with him.
yeah.
So,
And we haven't forgotten Houston either.
and
That's the
You,
yeah,
you got some really good teams. I know your Cinderella team you want to see play. They're not going to go but so far as to go in the tournament, but hopefully they'll get in. Would be Miami of Ohio. So
yeah.
right now,
I'd like to see him get in, but I'm beginning to understand. And sorry to interrupt, but I understand the case that people are making against them getting in from a one bid league, and if they lose in their conference tournament. Um, It's yeah, I guess what their ranking is, their power ranking is like 285 or something like that. That
yeah,
I mean that's pretty low out of like 350 something, D1 teams playing basketball. It's just I feel like for them, it's incumbent on them to run the table. If you have to prove it in March, and falling a game short or something in your conference tournament, it's unfortunate, but I think that's what would preclude you or exclude you rather from being in the tournament if you can't win your conference, no matter how good your record is.
it's unfortunate. They got a very low strength of schedule rating, a very high, depending on how you want to look at those numbers. I The other problem that they have, nobody wants to play them right now. They've
And
offered
that's the
and they've
thing.
reached out, and nobody wants to play them. Guess why nobody wants to play them? Because they know they'll lose to them,
Yeah.
and that's
Which
rough.
speaks to the quality of that team, and that's why I think it's a hard decision for the committee to make when they're deciding this field. That do you go, like, say again, if they lose in the tournament, I think it makes an easier decision for the committee. But if they win, how do you see them? If they're unbeaten going into selection Sunday, where do you see them? Do you put them in the top half and and really give them credit for the kind of year that they have, or do you just say, okay, maybe do you undersee them and have them prove that they're that Cinderella team that nobody wants to play at any point?
I think they have no choice. They have to run the table now. They
Hmm.
can't. They have, well, I'll say this, they have to win the tournament. If they lose a regular season game right now, so be it. But they got to win the tournament. They're not getting an at-large bid. I would put them in at about 6. That's what I would put them in as a
Yeah.
seed. Go look at Joe Lenardi, and he'll tell you.
Hmm.
He'll show you how what level they're at.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, the thing about this particular week that I really like, and I'll look at it maybe from a ACC standpoint, that you start to see a lot of rivalry games. We talk about Duke, UNC. Um, here in Louisville, I think it's like what they closed at Virginia, team that came in early January and beat them. And that's a team that has traditionally given them a lot of trouble. That has dominated that series since they entered the ACC in 2014. And but Louisville really needs a win in a big way. They lost to Clemson on Saturday, a game, and they won't. And as we record this, they're preparing to play Syracuse without Michael Brown. Um, because of injury, and I think his health will really determine a lot toward their seeding. I think the last seeding I saw them, even with the two losses, was like maybe a 6 seed, which I think is kind of generous considering they haven't exactly had the strongest February, and I think there are concerns now that teams have figured out that you shut them down with the 3 point, shut them. If you shut down their 3 point game, you pretty much can shut them down because they don't have much of an inside presence. And that's what they need to establish. But the last game of the season, I think, is always that harbinger for how you want to go into the tournament play. And if you're in the SEC, if you're in any of these Power Four conferences going into your conference tournament, you want to be a top four seed and get a double bye, so that gives you a chance. That extra day, not having to play until Friday and only having to win maybe 3 games in a row as opposed to maybe 4 or 5 in a row makes a big difference when you're heading into March.
You're right, Gary. And another team we forgot to mention, and they're going to be tough in the middle of it. St. John's. Mr.
Oh,
Patino is going to have. He's going to have them ready. He will have
yeah.
them ready.
John, I'm almost ashamed to admit how we have overlooked St. John's, and I don't know why. Because the Big East is not like some kind of weak conference. Yeah, they're just not. They're not Power Four, but think about teams like St. John's. I think what Providence has been playing well. I mean, of course, UConn is UConn, but what was the other team? Seton Hall is a team that you got to pay attention to in that league as well. This time of year. But
Creighton.
yeah, Creighton is not the same team as last year. They don't they're not as deadly with the 3 pointer, but they still rely on it. So you gotta on a good day they can pretty much beat anybody if those shots are falling from the perimeter. So you can't look past anybody in that league. And for St. John's, with Patino, it always starts with defense turning into offense. They like to press, they like to create the easy baskets, and in a lot of ways, it reminds me of when Patino was in Louisville, and they're so capable of going on what we used to call here the boom, where all of a sudden a game, maybe a 4 point game, can swing and become like a 16 to 20 point lead, for St. John's in a hurry. And it's very, very dangerous when you get. They're a very, very dangerous team when you get to this point in the season, and you've got your defense where you want it, and that again turns into easy offense for St. John's for any of Patino's teams. And I feel like if you have defense, then offense will take care of itself, especially if you can shorten that court a little bit and create backcourt turnovers. Get the ball at midcourt and turn it into a cherry picking basket at the other end. So again, that's a good point, John, to mention St. John's in this conversation as well. It's just a very very even field, and in my view, despite the fact that I still think Duke, Michigan, Arizona, and UConn are probably the likely number one seeds.
It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to start finding some more things out next Sunday, not this coming Sunday, but next Sunday. We'll find some more things out, find out who's in,
Hmm.
who's out, what seed everybody's in. Now, speaking of that, what about that women's side of the NCAA, man? They're playing some good ball. Of course, the UConn women with Gino Ariema, they're still ranked number
Hmm.
one. They still are rocking it and beating everybody. Notre Dame pulled off a big upset this weekend. They beat Louisville.
Hmm.
Hannah Hidalgo had 30 points, I think 16 rebounds. So that was a big
Hmm.
win. But South Carolina, they pulled out a tough one at Kentucky, 60-56.
Yeah.
Can't think of the coach's name there. He does a really good job.
Oh,
Uh,
talking about Kenny Brooks, yeah, who
yeah,
used to coach Virginia Tech, and
yeah.
yeah, and last year, he had Georgia Amore. That was their player. Um, this year, Clara Strack is really stepped up to be, really the lead, one of the leaders on this team. They're they were deep last year. I think they're developing that depth now. But like I say, without that dagger type player that Amore was last year, um, that's what they need. That one person that can get you a basket, either going to the rim or spotting up for a three. And Strack is that type of player, and she has a good supporting cast. But Sunday when I was there, I said they just don't have that dagger type game, that dagger type
Mhm.
player that can deliver the clutch three, and yet they only lose by four, and it was a last possession game. The thing that was really working in South Carolina's favor was that they hadn't committed many fouls. So even though they're up by three, they had like four fouls to give, I think, in
Mhm.
that final minute, and ended up just kind of getting a turnover to really get that ceiling basket. The thing about South Carolina is we we can look at the timeline for Dawn Staley's teams, that standout player, Asia Wilson, and then Aaliyah Boston, um, um, Camila Cardoza. I don't think they have that kind of player right now, that dominant player, but I see some potential that they have some depth. They have a really good inside game. Alcott she is just hard to stop. Edwards, when
Well,
when she's dialed in, Johnson and Edwards, when they're dialed in, they're very very hard to stop. And I want to say it was like after the game, just I was impressed by Edwards's length, but you don't often, you can't really get a look at it on TV. You can see them as a wing or as a forward or something, but then when you see him, it's just like not only is she tall, but it's like she's got a wingspan, and I think that's really really deceptive. Um, with UConn being number one, and the point I want to make is last year, Gino proved that he's still Gino. UConn still proved that they're UConn because a lot of the conversation, the discussion was on whether Dawn Staley had supplanted Gino as like, the coach that could, string a few championships together. And Gino just said, I'm still here. I feel like this year, as strong as UConn is, that programs like South Carolina Staley has the kind of team that can show you that, hey, we're still here as well. And winning the SEC regular season and going into the tournament as the number one seed, I think they have a chance to really solidify their rotations and lineup and make that play. Granted, they got just routed in the championship game last year. Maybe they were tired, maybe, you know, well, UConn, of course, had Paige Beckers. So that I think that that pretty much wrote its own story. But this year, there a lot goes through AZ Fudd. We've talked about her a number of times, and I still think they're the team to beat. But I still like how South Carolina is playing, and I think they're playing well at the right times. The main thing that they have to do is stay focused. And Sunday's game really kind of showed that yes, they won the game. There were times they really could have put it out of reach. They got up by double digits and they kind of took their eye off the ball for one reason or another. Maybe a couple of missed shots, not getting the ball inside. Not recognizing how to beat the zone against Kentucky, and those are things that they really have to work on this time of year. Because, of course, you get into the conference tournament, you're one and done, but in the NCAA tournament, it's more one and done, and you really have to work on your weaker areas, if you will, to what is that? Advance, succeed in advance.
Well, I think UConn is clearly the best team in the country. My favorite team, though, is South Carolina. I think they're very good. Well, let me back up. My favorite team is Notre Dame. Let me be very clear in all
Yeah,
sports. Okay, let me let
yeah,
me let me let me
and
not
and
say
you
I'm getting
can't
off Notre.
discount them in the ACC.
They're
I
going to
mean,
have to. They're going to have to go far in the ACC tournament. They are like 19-9, 19-10.
mhm.
They're a little bit off this year. But with that being said, Gary, and you're going to look at me like I'm crazy. The worst possible matchup, in my opinion, for South Carolina is always going to be UConn. Unless, again, in my opinion, unless South Carolina is able to play a zone, they will not beat UConn. And my reason for saying that, Dawn Staley plays a suffocating defense, a very good defense. Her teams are very sound defensively. But with that being said, they play a suffocating defense, which can be, like anybody else, can be susceptible. Pick and rolls, back doors, all those kind of good things that UConn did twice against South Carolina last year. I think in order to beat UConn, you have to play a zone. You may say to me, well, how are you going to play a zone? You got AZ Fudd, she'll shoot you right out of the zone. You can play a matchup zone, and you have to, even if you don't play a matchup zone, you play a zone where your players are very cognizant of the area that they have and know where the players are, and you get out there and get a hand in their face and make it difficult for them. I think UCLA is a very tough team this year. I think Texas is a very tough team this year. Over on the
and
Big,
LSU. We keep forgetting about LSU.
yeah, LSU, and I think over on the Big Ten side, if I'm not mistaken, the Michigan women are having a good season on that side, if I'm not mistaken as well. Keep forgetting UCLA's in the Big Ten now. Oh my God, that's unbelievable. But and I'm not going to say anything else. We'll keep moving on, Gary. I won't make any editorial comments about that. But
Okay.
I think South Carolina's going to go a long way. I think this South Carolina team you mentioned in the past, Cardoza or Aaliyah Boston or Asia Jones, they've always had. I call Asia. What's Asia's last name? Jones.
Wilson.
Asia Wilson. There I go messing names up again. But they've always had an aircraft carrier. Now they have an aircraft carrier in the making right now, but she's not ready to carry that team right now. I think this South Carolina team is they're always team oriented. I'm trying to find a way I want to say this because I'm not
I say,
trying
yeah,
to.
I was thinking this team is by committee. There's
Yeah,
not
but
a
I'm not. But I want to say it without. I'm not trying to tear the other teams down. The other teams are
no.
very good too. They all are team oriented. But I think this team has to rely more so on all the components and all the parts than others. You knew when you had Aaliyah Boston, if things were going sideways, you had her to drop that ball in the paint. Same thing with Asia Wilson, Asia Jones, whichever you want to go with, Gary. You had the same thing with Asia Wilson as well. This team, uh, you need uh, you need Tessa Johnson, you need Joyce Edwards. What's the guard's name? What's the other guard's name? She's usually running the point. I can't think of her name. Is
Yeah,
it?
I'm drawing a blank too, John. You know,
So
names are
yeah,
always that's my weak point at this age.
yeah. So it's gonna be interesting. But like I said, I will be rooting for South Carolina. But if they get in a matchup with UConn, I'm still rooting for South Carolina, but I think UConn gets them,
Yeah,
but it'll be interesting.
yeah.
And then our Terps will get in there, I think, but they'll get in at a low seed, maybe a 10 or an 11.
And that's probably right. And they might be underseeded a little bit, but you've seen more of Maryland than I have. I think again, I think that the Terps are looking for that aircraft carrier, so to speak, or
Mm,
they're looking for that lead boat, which they don't have right now. Again, it's about what is that? The sum of its parts, um,
mhm, mhm,
or by committee. And again, you said about basketball being team oriented, that you have to have a team that's willing to buy into that mentality and just say, okay, some players might want to start, maybe some players should start, but you've got a rotation that's good enough, but you have to develop a rotation that's good enough where the people that come in maybe after 4 minutes, maybe after 7 minutes, that they know what they're coming into. And I'll use Louisville as an example. They have a guard, Murray Berry, who comes off the bench, and she's kind of like instant offense. She can knock down a 3-pointer. Well, I asked Jeff Walls whether has there been any consideration of starting her, and he'll say, well, at some point, and I think it's going to be next year, just because they do have a pretty solid rotation. And I think again, the situation she comes into, she's had enough time to see the game develop and figure out where she can get the ball to shoot and where she can get the ball to someone to shoot. And there's a big that they have, and I'm going to take a stab at this name, Elif Istanbul. Gosh, I could say it real fast. Istanbululu. Saying it faster is a lot easier than trying to do it phonetically. Um, a big, but the thing with Louisville is, and I think this goes for every team, that you shorten your bench. As much as you want to have depth, you at this point in the year, you have to really shorten your bench, maybe 7, 8 players, maybe 9 players, depending on the situation and fouls, in particular. And I agree with you about South Carolina kind of being in that being that kind of team that can really go deep. But what you said about the developing a zone, I think really, really, really makes a lot of sense, because um, a team like, say, UConn, which can beat you from the perimeter, you can you can shut down Fudd if you dare, but there are other sharpshooters on that team, and you have to make that team. You have to kind of force them out and try to prove they can make that shot consistently. You also have, of course, the inside game. You have to have that kind of rebounding. But I do agree, as much as coaches hate to run zones and such, but a zone is really, really needed if you're going to limit a team from the 3-point line.
Agree, agree. Now, Gary, before we move on to our next subject, next topic, you had a photo on social media yesterday. I thought was really neat, and you had a caption with it as well. Talk a little bit about that real quick with Dawn Staley after the Kentucky game.
Well, I've a couple of times now. I think the first time I wasn't there for it, but when South Carolina played at Louisville, and they beat Louisville, and after the game, it was like all of the the Divine Nine sorority, several of them, they had like blocks of fans at the game, and they all wanted pictures with her. She came out and posed for pictures, signed autographs. She didn't miss anybody. I forgot how many were there, but Sunday's game, what I really stuck around after the game to see was the kind of presence she had in an enemy arena in the league. And during the game, the section I was in, and there were a number of South Carolina fans, so there's cheering. But there were also a lot of Kentucky fans who really remarked about just really how good a coach she is, and just kind of that resignation. It's like she's got another good squad, and that's the standard that we have to beat. But after the game. And I intentionally stuck around because I knew that, some players, because it was the season finale, there's not as much of a rush to get out of there, to get on the plane and get out of there. And of course, we're getting into spring break for a lot of them. And that might be why, but I want to say it was like, Edwards and Johnson were sticking around to, greet family and fans and friends and take pictures and stuff. And that went on a lot longer than I thought. But I also thought she's got to come out at some point. Dawn Staley has to come out because she does that kind of thing. And so then, my faith was rewarded when she comes out, the note still clenched tightly in her left hand, and she's posing for selfies. She's signing books. She's signing all kinds of pictures and stuff. And mixed in with a lot of these Gamecock fans that were in this one corner of the end zone were more than a few Kentucky fans, which I thought was really, really impressive. And I feel like that was a classy move by the fans that stuck around, because I think there is a healthy respect for Dawn Staley around, around the country, period, but really within that league because of what she's done and because of the kind of profile that she has brought to women's college basketball. Whether it's, again, winning 3 championships, whether it's, being an Olympic coach, and in this case, speaking out for her players that were overseas, and I think in Israel, as the conflict breaks out, and really speaking out for their safe return and really the safety of other players playing over there, which I think again, she understands her social impact, she understands her appeal, she understands her popularity. And she's just very good with it. She's a very busy person, obviously, but she takes the time to recognize people who have supported her and who support women's basketball. And I think that's the thing that I really, really admire about her. It's there's that saying, she understands the assignment, and and that was it. And again, I had to take pictures. I probably should add some more, but I'll get to that because there's a lot of pictures to go through. But she you have to admire someone who has that kind of presence. And we've always known, John, that college basketball, men's or women's, tends to be driven by the personalities of their coaches. I mean, the players are getting their attention as well, but we look at certain coaches. We talk about Gino and in first name terms. Kim Mulkey, you say Kim, there's no doubt about it. And Dawn as well. But she really, really, really embraces, I think, the responsibility that she has to her team, to her school, and to her sport, and maybe to the community, the basketball community, the African American community, but definitely to the basketball community.
Gary, well said, man. Totally agree, man. Thank you for sharing that. Let's slide over as a wrap up segment to talk about the NBA. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
what I'll say first before we get into what I would say the playoff teams. I'll talk about the hometown team real quick, the Washington Wizards. They're building for the future. Trey Young was
Again,
supposed to play this week. He was ejected from a game last night, sitting on the bench uh, as a
was
non-player.
was Steve Javy reffing that game?
Don't know who is reffing, but he's probably going to get a one-game suspension, so he may not play
Mhm.
his opening game with the Wizards this week. And Anthony Davis is out. Hopefully, he gets back next year. Um, they're trying to build something, Gary. I'm not sitting here and I'm not going to tear it down, criticize it. I'm hoping it's going to work out. They have a player named Sar. That's a big kid. He's grown to be about 6'11", almost 7 feet tall. They're going to build around him. They got the guard from Tennessee, Johnson.
Mhm.
He's having a decent season. So we'll see where they go. A couple people have said to me, well, John, they got Trey Young, but, playoff time, he's a liability because he can't check anybody. And my answer to this is, who cares? The Wizards haven't seen the playoffs in years. I just want him to get
Yeah.
to the playoffs. So
Yeah.
if he
Not
is a
not since
liability,
COVID.
yeah, if he is a liability on defense in the playoffs, so be it. He helped them get to the next level. So we'll see how that works out, man. And good luck to the Wizards. But let's take a look at these other teams, man. In the East, it's the Pistons, the Celtics, the Knicks, and I think Cleveland may surprise some people. They think because
Hmm.
James Harden's playing good ball, and over in the West, Spurs, OKC, and the Nuggets are starting to round into form. So, what do you think, Gary?
Wow. Having finally had a chance to see the Pistons, um, one, I really like the fact that they're leading the Eastern Conference because they used to bring up the rear in the Eastern Conference. And Cade Cunningham, just the way that they've built that Bickerstaff, and I keep wanting to say Bernie Bickerstaff, but it's the son. Um, the way he has built that team, through the draft, through some really crafty trades, and really through his own system. I really like the Eastern Conference because you could talk about. We saw what Boston did Sunday night. We've seen what Detroit can do. I think going into Cleveland, but you've got the New York Knicks, who I think are a strong team. This team might be better than last year. And that's a team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals, but the team, John, that I don't think they understand yet how good they really are is San Antonio. That team, I'd say Wembanyama's health is going to be a big key to how far they go because as dominant as he can be, sometimes I really wonder about, like say that banging that he'll have to take in the playoffs, because I think what this will probably be his first playoffs, and teams, they're playing harder. He's gonna get elbowed. He's gonna get pushed around. He's got to figure out a way to really draw his game, draw more out of his game to help them advance, even though he's the biggest player on the floor and anybody they play. But, you can't count out LA. You can't count out Denver for one. And I still think Denver is like that team that, they're in the mix, but they're not on top. And I think that's the thing maybe they need, because they like kind of that underdog role, for lack of a better term. Um, or, maybe being overshadowed by some other teams. But we still have to look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, and as long as they've got Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, that's where that's the train that drives this engine right now. And they're a bad matchup right now with San Antonio, but of course you get into the postseason and anything is possible. I think we're going to see a whole lot over this stretch run as to really which team is going to come out on top in that Western Conference. And I will not discount Oklahoma City by any stretch, even though San Antonio looks like the team to beat in that conference right now.
Gary, go ahead and take us home, man.
Okay, let's see. What do we have to look forward to? World Baseball Classic, spring training. Need I say more? Stretch run for the NHL, for the Stanley Cup. Now that the Olympics are over and players are back with their squads, let's see who comes out on top. Of course, we're in March Madness, and the women's tournaments are starting in earnest this week. John, you probably witnessed the CIAA up the road, D2, and I'm trying to remember who won that one, but. But yeah, when you get into conference tournament play, anything can happen. The best part, John, is you get multiple games in one day in one place. All you need is a ticket, a session ticket. If you're good and if you're willing to sit through 4 games in one day and get home well after midnight, hey, go for it, because it is something to behold. So, we'll see how things start to settle out with some of these potential number one seeds and dark horse teams and Cinderella squads like Miami of Ohio. So there's plenty to watch. There's plenty for you all to come back and hear us talk about and draw your own conclusions. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and well, John, I think that's about it. We will be here for you.
Hey, thanks for watching us again. Another great week in sports. Watch some basketball, the NCAA men's and women's. Watch the NBA. Watch the World Baseball Classic. Watch some hockey. But above all else, just watch some sports and come back and see us. Take care.